The millennial generation, those born between 1982 and 2003, is one of the largest in U.S. history. There are over 70 million of them, and they're choosing a very select number of locations in the country to live. And companies happen to be following where they choose to settle. In fact, the data are clear. They have a preference for places that offer mobility choices that include the car, but go way beyond the car as well. Given the historic context, the economic conditions, and the technology, along with the size of this generation, it means that they will have a driving force in our economy for a long time to come, and their preferences will leave an indelible impact on our country. One word I'd like you to consider is the word pragmatic. And their preferences are indeed just that, very pragmatic. In a study conducted for the American Public Transportation Association, which is the focus of my presentation today, the lives of millennials were analyzed. The findings showed a real departure from previous generations that have gone before them. The primary goals of this research were to explore the attitudes towards mobility, including factors that play a role in decision making, such as social, financial, environmental factors, and the relationship between those factors and making major life decisions, such as where to live and where to work. We also want to understand the current mobility behaviors across demographic and lifestyle groups, and identify common pain points and benefits. We wanted to uncover opportunities for promoting transit options, including new digital offerings. We accomplished this by doing focus groups in 5 cities and polling 1,000 participants in 6 cities around the country that are known for creating millennial buzz. So we wanted to know why folks are moving to those cities, what attracts them, why do they decide to move there from some other place they might have a strong connection to. The focus groups were conducted in Minneapolis, Boulder, San Francisco, Austin, and Boston. The polling took place in 6 markets: Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, Seattle, Portland, and Washington, D.C. Participants include those that live downtown and those who live near downtown, those who live in suburbs, as well as rural areas that are close to those cities as well. So you get the whole entire metropolitan area. This is not just a close into the central city situation. This includes the whole entire metropolitan area. First, we will address the awareness and engagement of mobility options, as well as their perceptions of barriers and their usage. We surveyed participants and asked them about their top 5 mobility options and choices. Utilizing the car and walking were their most preferred options. However, the story does not stop here. In fact, a thoroughly pragmatic generation, which they are, they actually view each and every trip as separate entities and assess which mode makes sense for each trip they take. Hence, the notion of mobility options is very important for them. They want to be able to use the car, but they want to have other options as well. So this is not about getting rid of your car, it's about having a variety of options so that you don't have to be forced to drive for every single trip. And this is a fundamental value that this generation has. Think about what a great departure this is from generations before, where we utilized the car for every single thing we did. Now this generation makes a separate decision for every trip. Such situations as grocery shopping, for instance, according to our polling, might be something they might want to use the car for. But there's cases where using public transportation makes a lot more sense. Once again, they're thoroughly pragmatic. And there's this new technology that just keeps on changing their lives, such as the smartphone, which is closing the gap between the perceived benefits of the car versus public transportation. As more transit agencies around the country deploy real-time applications that allow customers to know where the bus or train is at any given moment by simply looking at the phone and figuring out, okay, it's 2 minutes away, I'll go downstairs and catch it. Increasingly, transit users will be able to be as spontaneous as the automobile user. So this is closing the perceived gap between having a car for every single trip and having other options as well. In fact, this newfound freedom is changing the way people travel around the community, and the millennials are fully engaged in all these options as well. In fact, they frequently use more than one mode of transportation to reach a destination. Reasons noted in our poll include the ability to get exercise, to save money, or simply because it saves the most time to do so. Now, there's this assumption around that as people get older and they have kids, their preferences will somehow change. The data do not support that assertion. Matter of fact, what we found is that a car becomes one of the options that they go to, but a multimodal lifestyle actually remains a daily reality for millennial parents. They feel even less tied to a car than those millennials that don't have kids. By the time they become parents, millennials actually have established a routine that they're very comfortable with and they wish to continue. They can see the positives and negatives of using a different type of mode for travel and how these realities might impact their choices for each and every trip. So whether they're a parent or not, they still want to have that flexibility to take whatever option makes the most sense for a given trip. So as I just illustrated, while the car is still a preferred option, millennials prefer not to be tied down to it for every single trip. We found this to be true even after they have kids. This unique preference for choices that sets them apart and communities that have had the most success at attracting this attention of the generation has actually made those investments to allow choices to occur. Now we'll look at some of the motivating factors that will illuminate why those behaviors are that we just mentioned, why they exist. So here's a quote from a millennial that was part of our study. Quote, "Many of us are happy with biking or walking and see public transit as a way to meet people, to connect, and have extra time to do work while commuting. And with smartphones, it's easy to figure out bus schedules and keep connected while commuting." So millennials are mobile and so is their work. Being able to connect with digital resources and accomplish tasks while they're traveling is a growing trend and an important benefit of public transportation. In fact, it is one of the reasons why being tied to a car for every single trip happens to not be a very attractive option for them. It's the smartphone. Here are two more quotes from survey participants. Quote, "My generation is more willing to use public transit and alternative transportation to have less effect on the environment, save money, and to be more engaged with their community." And here's another. "We are more aware of how our actions impact the larger community." So millennials are saying that they get to be social while they're traveling. Much of this is actually taking place online. They also display an increased awareness and desire to connect with their community. They feel like taking public transportation makes them feel more connected to the community in which they live. That's a very important value that they hold as a generation. So here's another quote from a millennial that was part of the survey. Quote, "I think my generation is more environmentally conscious because of all the research on the detrimental impacts of fossil fuels on the environment. So I think more people in my generation try to reduce their carbon footprint." So that's one sentiment. However, what we find is that while millennials consider the environment and their carbon footprint significant, Other considerations are also very important, such as saving money, convenience, the ability to get exercise, and a preference for a transit-friendly neighborhood. So as you can see, the environment as an issue ranks lower than all those other things. So once again, one could call that pragmatic. So Wi-Fi and 3G options are very popular, and combined with the smartphone, such as when we have real-time transit applications which allow transit users to actually know where the bus or train is, it makes them just as spontaneous as a car owner. It will allow them to work and to socialize, which they cannot do while they're driving. Now, the majority of millennials view transit as the backbone of their multimodal experience. They would like transit to help them optimize their travel experience as well as offer ideas on how to travel based on their frame of mind. So there's all these different options out there in which they can travel. They might bike to a train station, they might walk, and they view transit as the backbone of that whole entire experience. In fact, our polling shows that they would like to experience their communities through public transportation. In the future, our transit real-time applications, for example, may offer the same advice as a friendly bus driver that is aware of new discoveries that can be found along the route. So once again, another key value, as I mentioned earlier, was connect me to my community, and I view public transportation as the backbone to that experience. So this is a fundamental difference than previous generations. Not against the car, view it all as equal options, whatever is most pragmatic for my trip I'll take. So I'd like to leave you with 3 takeaways. First, pragmatism. Investment is about pragmatism because it can increase the attractiveness of a community. Number 2, job growth. Our economy is changing, but communities can in fact compete, even in a globalizing environment where things are changing very quickly. And number 3, options win. Options win. Providing options for everyone, including millennials, is a winning strategy for communities all over the country. In fact, communities that are willing to invest properly can see outsized benefits. 1, children stay or return. So you have a multi-generational community. Communities can have grandmothers and fathers and daughters all living in the same metropolitan area because there are choices and opportunities for everyone, including job opportunities, which, as I mentioned, are increasingly tracking with employee location decisions. Increasingly, cities around the country are choosing to create options that are attractive for everyone, whether people choose to drive, to take public transportation, or walk to pick up a carton of milk. Each option is becoming viable in those communities. These communities are increasingly enjoying unique dividends. With that, I will conclude and will be happy to answer any questions. Thank you.